Good day, everybody. This is E. Marcel too. Welcome to another edition of the Sports Inquirer Show. Very excited that you're joining us today on April 1st, 2021. We have a jam-packed show for you, starting with the technical state of Georgia athletics. We'll delve into the men's NCAA basketball tournament. We're finally in the Final Four. I have some thoughts on that. The Indiana Hoosiers have made a hire to their open head coaching position, and we have some opinions on that. Also, we'll transition to the Gridiron Blitz, major moves in the NFL with the NFL draft coming up at the end of the month. Also, the 17-game season has been announced. We have some perspectives on that. Beanball is back as far as a portion of the show. Major League Baseball opens its regular season today on April 1st. So I have some quick predictions for you. And finally, miscellaneous department. I'll go over what I've been watching on Netflix and how an NBA superstar is sabotaging his off the court career by not being able to stay off of social media. It'll all make sense when we get to it. As always, to follow everything that we're doing, head to the sportsinquirer.net, premier site for news and notes in the world of sports. We were doing some updates earlier this morning, have some really good content up there for you. We're able to speak with Bailey Showers, the assistant coach for Georgia State men's tennis. They have been on a really good run, so we're able to catch up with them. That full interview with the video and audio is up on the site right now. Also, Georgia Tech head coach for volleyball, Michelle Collier, she joined us earlier in the week. They are in contention for the ACC championship. So they have some big matches coming up this week. We were able to speak with her about that and everything going on with her program. So make sure that you head to the sportsinquirer.net to get all of those interviews and things we have going on. You can look forward to within the next few days another edition of their Verbal Submission podcast, where we delve into the world of professional wrestling and mixed martial arts. Make sure you check that out. We also will probably have a standalone Beanball edition of our podcast where we go a little bit further into previewing Major League Baseball's season. So make sure that that's on the radar over the next few days to see what we have going on with the site. Our social media platforms on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Search for us, all one word, Sports Inquirer, and you will be able to subscribe to us on those platforms, and you'll get all of our updated content as we post it. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Podcast, iTunes, and wherever you get your audio and video. And just do a search for us once again under Sports Acquire. That's all one word. Or actually, that's one's a separate words. But make sure you do a search, and you will find our information on there. And that will be a great way to delve into everything that you need to know with the Sports Inquirer. So make sure that you check it out. All right, let's move to the first portion of our show, which is the technical state of Georgia athletics and the NCAA tournament for the men. You know, this tournament's been very interesting because it's not the traditional format that we know of. There's still 68 teams and they have playing games and all of that stuff, but that traditional setup of games on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday have been adjusted really just due to the schedule with the pandemic and everything like that. First of all, I'm happy that there is an NCAA tournament because remember this time last year, we didn't have a men's or women's tournament, and that was very disappointing. So at least we have a tournament going on. But it's just a weird setup as far as the games being on different times. And maybe because I'm getting older and, I turned 40 this year, but these games that are with tip offs at 10 p.m. were very tough to watch, very tough to stay up for, particularly in the Elite Eight when you had Baylor and Arkansas and the Michigan UCLA games in the round of eight or the Elite Eight tip off at 10 o'clock on to Monday or Tuesday night. That's rough. That's a tough go. Now I understand. Now normally those games would be you'd have two, and we're getting more to that traditional format. Two late games on a Saturday, 5 o'clock and maybe 8 o'clock. This is all Eastern Standard Time when I'm talking. And then Sunday, you get that game at 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock, so that you can be done by 6 or 7 o'clock on Sunday night. So that's what we're used to, and that's fine. But yeah, the way the setup is, it's just very tough to to get when you're when you come up, and it's been like the F format's been wow since I started watching the NCAA tournament really consistently. I remember in about 89 or 1989, 1990. I go that far back when I was 8, 9 years old, and that format has been the setup. So when you make a transition to this type of deal, and I think it's a one-off deal because if you look at the ratings and the way things are set up, it's not the same. Now, obviously, we're in a different time now. Well, so with the pandemic, and we're dealing with a lot more issues in the world than some basketball games. Look, I enjoy that you're listening to my show, and sports is a big part of my life, but I'm not. You can't have blinders on to what is going on in the world. So priorities and things have changed. I think with things that are going on right now, you'll have more return to normality by this time next year. And I think you'll see that with the tournament format as far as the broadcasting. But it just definitely been a different vibe than what we're used to seeing when it comes to the show or comes to the contest. Now the contest itself, my bracket's pretty solid. From the very beginning, when I did my bracket, I had four number one seeds in the final four, and four number one seeds made it to the round of eight. So I'm not too mad at that at all. And my final is Gonzaga beating Baylor, which can still take place, which is very good. Interestingly enough, I didn't enter any pools. I didn't enter any competitions. Put no money down, on everything that's going on. So that I mean, the 1 year I do that, I actually do pretty decently with the tournament. But as I said, this is a very unpredictable tournament. We didn't know what was going on. But I said Gonzaga and Baylor have clearly been the best teams, I thought, all season. Now, Gonzaga undefeated. They were able to roll past USC 85-66 to make the Final Four for the second time in program history. They're just a deep team. When you have that front court and that balanced offense, and then you have a guy like Suggs at the guard spot who can create his own shot and can distribute it, that's a very tough combination to beat. And he's a legitimate top 3 or 4 draft pick in this upcoming draft for the NBA. So when you have elite NBA prospect talent to go along with their system, that's a very tough combo to beat. And they dominated USC with the Mobley brothers. And USC came to that game playing very well, and Gonzaga just rolled past them. So I think you're seeing them in a dominant way. And then Baylor, they were to beat Arkansas 81-72 to reach the Final Four for the first time since the 1950s. So very good for them. I think the thing about Baylor, and the reason I thought they were the second best team throughout the entire year, the pandemic really affected them. They had a shutdown for about 2 weeks in the middle of the season. They've been trying to work their way back into form. They lost in the Big 12 tournament. People were kind of down on them. I'm like, if they're able to be healthy and they finally have all their guys on the team playing together, they defensively can lock down. They may have the best defense. Now, UCLA may have a say about that, but I think defensively, they may be the top defense in the entire nation. And you saw that in the Arkansas contest offensively. I know they scored 81 points, but the Bears were not efficient offensively, but they were able to lock down Arkansas, especially in the second half, to emerge with the victory. So the Baylor, we'll go on that side. They're going to face Houston in their Final Four contest. The Cougars were able to beat Oregon State 67-61. The Houston is in the Final Four for the first time since, I believe, 1984, with the whole Phi Slamma Jamma with with the Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler and that whole crew. So it's a big moment for them. A big moment for Kelvin Sampson. And we'll get to the Indiana job in a moment with Mike Woodson being hired by the Hoosiers. He was at Indiana, if you remember, years ago, and got involved in a very nasty scandal with academics and other things involved, and was told to leave. And you saw him go to the NBA, and I honestly thought that that scandal in Indiana was so bad that you would not see him on a college sideline again. But sure enough, he found his way back into it with Houston, and now they're in the Final Four. So he is a very good college coach. We've seen him have success, numerous programs. Remember, he's at Oklahoma. He did very well. I said Indiana, ups and downs, but all the off the court stuff really was the doom for him there. But yeah, he has the Houston Cougars in the Final Four against Baylor. So an all Texas matchup in the Final Four. I think Baylor is going to win the contest because they're going to be able to slow down the contest enough to show the liabilities of Houston. Now, if it's Houston wants to move up and down the court, they want to be very active. get the big, both teams are in the 80s in that regard, maybe even the 90s. That's where Houston wants to play. But I think Baylor defensively will be too much for them to handle in that regard. And Gonzaga faces UCLA, the 11th seed in the Final Four. The Bruins were able to defeat the top seed Michigan 51-49 in a tough contest to watch. And that was a late game, and just offensively, both teams struggled throughout. But credit to the Bruins to find their way into the Final Four. Cronin's an excellent head coach. You've seen him do his thing at Cincinnati. Now he has UCLA, maybe a little bit ahead of schedule in the Final Four. Are they a Cinderella team? That's a debate. UCLA, maybe the outside of Duke, North Carolina, and Kansas, maybe the most marquee franchise or program in all of college men's basketball. So for them to be, and then I know they came in as an 11 seed, so that would indicate a Cinderella type story, a come out of nowhere. But it's also UCLA, and yes, they do live a lot off of the time in the 60s and 70s with under John Wooden and all of the legendary Hall of Fame players they had going on there. Yes, I know they had a spike in the mid 90s with the O'Bannon brothers and Herrick as the head coach and won national championship then. But still, it's a storied program that we all know if you follow college basketball. So for them to be a Cinderella story is a little weird. But if you look at how they came into the tournament as an 11 seed and low expectations, they have made a very solid run. And as I mentioned, Baylor I think has the best defense in college basketball. But UCLA's defense may be playing the best out of anybody right now. But I just think Gonzaga is going to be too tough for them to be able to pull off this contest. I think they can if they can limit the scoring, if they can slow the pace down and get it in the 60s, we might be talking. But I think Gonzaga ultimately is going to find a way to roll in that contest. But yeah, the Final Four has been interesting. The crowds have slowly found their way into it. Now I don't know what it's in the dome this year, the Lucas Oil Stadium. These contests, I don't know what the capacity is. The crowd, they do a good job on TV making it sound louder than it really is. Because I think if you look at the visuals and you see how the setup is, it's not a normal amount of people in the stands. But maybe with the dome, they may allow more people in there, a lot more spread out. So we'll see how the visuals of the Final Four are this upcoming weekend. So we'll be checking that out. And as I mentioned, Mike Woodson hired by the Indiana Hoosiers to be their head coach. And when I first saw the move, you think Mike Woodson, older gentleman in coaching standards, and I believe he's in his 60s. And he's like, wow, when you make a hire like that, you don't know how long the guy will be there and everything like that. But then I took a step back and I looked at it in several ways. He's a former player, so that helps. So in Indiana, that matters. A lot of programs. I keep saying franchises. I'm thinking that they're pro sports. A lot of programs, you can kind of hire someone from the outside, and if they can do a good job, that's the most important thing is doing a good job. But the initial reaction to it is it, it doesn't really matter where the guy comes from. If he can coach, and do a good job, we're all right with that. Places like Indiana, and we're going to in North Carolina, they've dealt with this in the past. Always trying to find a Carolina guy. Duke's going to deal with it in the next 3-4 years when Mike Krzyzewski retires. We need to get a Duke guy in there. There are certain programs that it matters who is the next person to take over. And for Indiana, they've gone to outside route, mentioned with Sampson, recently with Miller, and it has not worked. Tom Crean, and it has not worked out. You get Mike Woodson, All America, with them, played with Isaiah Thomas. Coach was a player under Bob Knight, and you noticed that the day that Woodson was hired, Bob Knight made a statement saying his approval and saying that Mike Woodson's as good of a guy as he's ever known, and it was sent out by Indiana. Now we saw the thawing of that really frosty relationship between Bob Knight and Indiana 2 years ago when he came back to Indiana for the first time in decades. They had a reunion of a championship team where they were honoring a lot of Indiana Hoosier legends, and he actually was in Bloomington. Very emotional moment. People were crying and all that other stuff. So there's been a thawing of that relationship, but for a lot of Indiana people to have Bob Knight's approval of it matters, and that's very big for them to have that take place. Now on the court, and this is where I looked at it from a outside looking in. Woodson is he's very qualified. That's not the problem. He's been a head coach for the Knicks in a pro level. The Knicks last time they made the playoffs and did anything was when he was head coach of the Knicks. He was head coach of Atlanta Hawks and made several playoff appearances with them. He's been an assistant, I think, most recently with Doc Rivers, and so he's been under a lot of good coaching tutelage, and he's been a head coach at the NBA level. So if you coach at the NBA level, you know your X's and O's. And I really thought he could have been a guy to get an open position in the NBA over some of these recent coaching hirings, opening positions. So for him to go to Indiana is a very good move, in that regard. I said he's former Indiana Hoosier, so he knows the program very well. He's a black man, a minority. I think that helps too. It's not the reason he got hired, but I think it does help when you can relate on that level. Thad Matta being an assistant, or I guess the consigliere or the advisor, very big move and a good move by them to do that, because Woodson, as I mentioned, all the pro coaching accolades, he has not coached at the collegiate level, and there are differences between college and pro. You're dealing with younger players. You have to deal with recruiting. You have to deal with academic advisors, compliance. There's a lot of paperwork and a lot of different things when you're a college head coach as opposed to being a professional head coach. So he has Thad Matter there. That'll be a very good advisor for him to help him through that process. I've talked to coaches in the past that have been at professional level in any sport and at the collegiate level. And they will tell you that the college level, and they're tough things. Some parts of pro are better than college, and then the reverse is true. But the paperwork you have to deal with, making sure your kids go to class, making sure that you're compliant as far as that goes, recruiting and going through that whole process. It's just a lot more of that. You got to deal with the donors in your fundraising or development, whatever term you want to say, dealing with that type of stuff. There's a lot of different things that the college game, you literally have to take a test to make sure you know all the compliance rules. I've seen those tests taking place, and coaches having to go in there, look at the manuals and make sure they know all the rules that are going on. Pros have some of that as well, but it's not as extensive. So having to deal with all that is different for a head coach for that at the college level. So Thad Matta, who obviously head coach at Ohio State for a long time, he knows all the ins and outs of the collegiate game. That's very beneficial for Woodson to be in that spot. And now the Big Ten is a very competitive conference. I think Juwan Howard is going to build a monster at Michigan, and a similar deal, kind of with Woodson, except take off a few years as far as age goes. I think Juwan Howard has all those same attributes I mentioned with Woodson. So Michigan is going to be a major player in college hoops. And when he starts recruiting and gets all those guys on campus and starts talking to them and has LeBron James and Dwayne Wade on speed dial and Pat Riley to give some references, he's going to recruit a lot of talent. So Michigan's not going anywhere. You figure Michigan State with Tom Izzo, they're going to be a solid program. Yeah, in Illinois they had a big bump this year. So they're, I think, not going to be going anywhere, going too far. But Indiana, if they're at their peak, again, it's been a while. It's really been since the Bob Knight era that they've been at that peak level of college hoops, national championship contenders. They have the resources and the ability to be at that level. So I think that Woodson has a chance to be that type of head coach there. But as far as where they are in a Big Ten landscape, because that's where you start off with, can they be the second or third best team in the Big Ten? Absolutely. And if you're in that level in the Big Ten, that puts you on a national scale to be really competitive and as a national championship level. So I think that Indiana, if it works out right, if he does a good job, can be in that spot. right, let's move on to the Gridiron Blitz, a portion of our show where we'll go over things in the NFL. This is April 1st. As we record this show, we're finally getting towards the NFL draft. Maybe I think because of the pandemic, we have a lot more free time to debate things and analyze things. But it seems like this draft should have taken place months ago. The hype has been going and going, and I think the reason for it is someone I forgot which commentator on one of the networks. And I would give credit. I always give credit to when I hear something and someone says something. I was like, yes, I agree with that. I always show love to people. But this is maybe the most intriguing draft in NFL history because you look at just because of the top 5 or 6 and the talent that's out there. It's an level, elite talent level in several spots. You have Trevor Lawrence, who is can be a generational quarterback. You have the Zach Wilson, an intriguing, and just we'll start with the quarterbacks. You have Zach Wilson at BYU. It looks like he has a lot of check marks for him. You have Justin Fields, dynamic guy that's coming out of Ohio State, a major program. Trey Lance, who some would say is the best quarterback in the entire draft. Some would say even just as comparable to Trevor Lawrence, but he comes from South Dakota State. I mean, North Dakota State, excuse me. We haven't seen him play we saw he played one game, I know, in the fall, but really in a year, we've not seen him play consistently. You have Mac Jones, who had the most productive season in history of Alabama football. Some would say maybe history of the SEC, and that was after Joe Burrow's year. He's in the draft. So you have all of that going on. Kyle Pitts, maybe the most intriguing tight end prospect ever that's come out of the draft. I'm not saying he's going to turn out to be the best tight end ever, but as far as prospect, he's right there. And then you look at the teams in the top 5 or 6. Jacksonville, number 1 overall pick, Urban Meyer. Where do they go with their draft? The Jets already have Sam Darnold in the fold at quarterback. Do they bring a quarterback in? Where does he go? Where's they do? San Francisco already had Jimmy Garoppolo, a guy who 2 years ago led them to a Super Bowl appearance. They look like to be ready to move on from him after making the move up to the third draft, or third pick in the draft. The Falcons with Matt Ryan already, maybe the best, I think the best quarterback in history of that franchise, with a new head coach in Arthur Smith coming over from Tennessee. Do they start the rebuild process early, or do they take one of these prospects? And you have wide receivers, special guys. You have Jamar Chase from LSU, a Smith from Alabama, 2 Biletnikoff winners. Smith won the Heisman Trophy this year. 2 guys who are all-time prospects at wide receiver. Then you have a lineman from 2 linemen from Northwestern and Oregon, guys who are top 10 prospects. All this is going on with this draft as you go down the line. Miami with Tua, where do they go? Looks like they're going to ultimately choose Tua or stick with Tua at quarterback and take one of these offensive prospects. Yeah, it's just a lot going on with this draft. It's very exciting. But I think that San Francisco moving up to the number 3 spot, they're going to take a quarterback. We all know Trevor Lawrence is going to go to Jacksonville. That's the pick. That's who they're going to take. Number 2, man, Zach Wilson. It seems like he's going to be going to the Jets, but I still see that Sam Darnold prospect of them maybe choosing him and then going with maybe one of the offensive skill players, trading out of that pick. Maybe Carolina wants to move up into the top 5 or top 2 and get Zach Wilson or Justin Fields or Mac Jones. We don't know. But San Francisco is definitely taking quarterback at number 3. You don't make that move and that capital of multiple first round picks to move up to number 3 to take a lineman. That's not what you do. Or even to take one of the offensive skill players. And as intriguing as Chase are and Pitts and Devonta Smith, you don't make that move for San Francisco to number 3 to take one of those guys. You're taking a quarterback. And Garoppolo, to be fair, has 2 big issues with him with San Francisco. He's inconsistent and he's unavailable. That's a bad combination for any position in any professional sport, but quarterback, it is almost a death knell for you being a starter and keeping that position. When you're inconsistent with your play and you're dealing with injuries that you've missed multiple games in multiple seasons with that franchise, you can't stay on the field. You dealt with the knee injury a few years ago. Then you're dealing with last year, he got banged up and didn't only played a handful of games. You put all of that together, you can be as talented as you want, but if you can't stay on the field consistently, that's not a good situation. So you put all that together, and that's why I think that you're seeing San Francisco move up to number three. I personally, and this can change so much over the next few weeks. I like Fields more than Jones. I think in that offense, you need mobility. You need a guy that can throw at multiple levels. And I think Fields has been picked on quite a bit by the things that have been going on with we saw yes, I saw the Northwestern game. I saw the Indiana contest last year when he was at Ohio State. He did not play well. But I also saw him play in the playoffs against Clemson and just dominate that contest. And physically, he checks all the boxes. I think he's a better athlete than Jones. I think his throwing ability is just as equal. Jones may be a little bit more accurate, and accuracy should not be something ignored when you're evaluating quarterbacks. But I just think ultimately Fields in that offense under Kyle Shanahan is going to do better than Mac Jones. Now Jones can go in there and I think do well. Also, I think that offense with just the multiplicity of it and the ability to run the ball makes life a lot easier for a quarterback. But I think if you have a guy like Field to go on the outside and do a little bit more, it makes it even more dynamic. So I think that's where I would go if I was making the pick right now. But you can make a case for Fields, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones. Trey Lance is the one that and I must admit, I just have not seen the guy play too much. And he may be the best prospect out of them all. You never know. But we've just seen so much of Fields and Mac Jones from last year, and obviously Trevor Lawrence in his 3 years at Clemson. You have a better beat on what they're going to do. But we'll be keeping track of everything that's going on with the NFL draft as it comes up over the next few weeks. The NFL did announce that they're going to 17 games for the regular season. It's not a surprise. In essence, they have 20 games on their slate, and the 20 games between preseason and the regular season. And when you have so we're going to 17 regular season games and then 3 preseason games. It just makes sense that if you're going to charge all the money for the fans and treat them as regular season games, preseason contest, you're gonna make one a regular season deal. So this is not a surprise at all. And I know guys like Alvin Kamara, the running back for the New Orleans Saints, has expressed his disapproval of the 17 game regular season. And I can understand it from a player's perspective. 16 games are hard enough, but you add a 17 game, there's more injuries that can happen, things like that. We get it, but the the players sign off on a lot of these things. They'll probably get a little bit more money. It will generate more money. That additional regular season game, the players will get a bigger piece of that pie in that regard. Or the pie will get big, maybe not a bigger percentage wise, but the actual size of the pie will be bigger just with that extra regular season game, and that trickles down to the players and everything like that. I don't know if there's going to be two buys for each team. I think there's only one buy so far, but I think a second bye week would be beneficial for a lot of people involved because that bye week will help with rejuvenation and recovery from the contest. But I think as we record the show, there's not going to be a second bye week. But we'll be keeping track of all of that stuff as it transitions on through the NFL season. I'm trying to think of any other news from the NFL that I needed to address. I don't think so. I think that's all we need to discuss. All right, we'll wrap up the show with two more segments. Beanball portion of the show, we'll MLB predictions. Yeah, I'll give these real quick because it's just the best way for me to do it. First of all, good job by the New York Mets, and we're biased. I'm a Mets supporter. I grew up in New York City. I do like the Mets, but no, it is major news though as far as the landscape of MLB. Francisco Lindor signed his 10-year deal with the New York Mets last night. 10 years, $341 million. We saw that the Mets made a proposal for I think 325 earlier in the week, but the Cohen, the owner of the team, met with Lindor. They had dinner. The Mets, so the Mets and the representatives for Lindor, they threw some extra money in there. 10 years, 341. I mean, it's right there with Tatis and some other guys. I think he average wise is maybe second or third in Major League Baseball. I think it's a good move for both parties involved. For the Mets, very important that you sign this guy. He's a top five talent, top 10 talent in all of Major League Baseball, a young shortstop that is going to be, and trust me, and the Mets are going to be competitive this year. We'll get to the predictions of the actual team. But when we get to the fans being in the stands by the end of this baseball season, and that's where we're trending towards, he's going to love playing in New York. He's going to be very excited. He's an exciting player. The energy, everyone talks about the Yankees, and rightfully so, as far as the New York baseball franchise of note, because they've earned it. But when the Mets are good, it could become a Mets, I don't say a Mets town, but the Mets get a lot of love in New York. And he'll receive that. He'll recognize that. So I think for the Mets, as I said, it's a marquee guy that you can sign, you can build around. You have him and Alonso now, Alonso, the first baseman. Those are two field guys that you can really do a lot of promotion with, and that's a very good thing. As far for Lindor, that's a good security. 10 years, $341 million. The only other franchise he was well, if you look at it this way, the Yankees probably weren't going to sign him to that. They have their middle infielders set. We saw with the Red Sox and not wanting to give that type of money to Mookie Betts, they weren't going to go there for Lindor. Maybe the Angels, but they already have Trout on their salary and Rendon. So would they go there as far as the money goes? The Dodgers are the only team that may have gone there because you can see a potential open spot in the middle infield for Lindor in the future. But I don't think he wanted to wait that long and be in this same position this time next year. So I think that those were only teams that were really going to go and break the bank for him as far as the finances go. And as I said, he's not in the middle of Siberia. He's going to be in that New York market, which I'm sure helps him as far as his off the field endeavors. And as I said, it's the Mets. When the Mets are doing well, and the past few years have not been kind to the Mets, but when they're rolling and doing good, it's a fun time to be a New York Met in that city when things are going well. So that's a very good move for Lindor and for the Mets. How does it translate on the field this year? Let's go to the NL since we're talking about Lindor and everything going on. I still think the Braves are the best team in the NL East, though, with the Lindor signing. I like Lindor, and I mentioned all the superlatives with them, but the Braves still have the better team overall. First of all, the hitting, they're going to put up a lot of runs this year. When you can have a starting lineup that includes Ozuna, who I think can be 40-40 is a lot to ask for home runs and stolen bases, but a full healthy season, he's going to be close. When you could throw him out there along with an Albies and Freddie Freeman, the reigning NL MVP, Ozuna, who arguably could have been the MVP last year in the NL, and then you go further on down the lineup with Dansby Swanson, a solid contact hitter, like Christian Pache, who is Rookie of the Year candidate. He's going to be playing center field all year. Yeah, Austin Riley. Yes, I know he strikes out a lot, but can hit for power. That lineup is going to put up some good numbers this year. And the pitching staff is very good. Soroka coming back is very big for them. But if you look at Freed and some of the other, Morton, Charlie Morton, a new acquisition for them, they are going to be and Ian Anderson, another Rookie of the Year candidate. We saw what he did later on in the season for the Braves as far as the regular season and pitching well in the postseason. And then we have guys like Bryce Wilson who can give you some innings. Kyle Wright, fellow Vanderbilt Commodore, that's my boy, but he's been inconsistent. But he is a solid arm. And if he can get it together, he can give you some solid innings. Well, the pitching is very strong, and the bullpen is solid. I think the Braves are still the best team in that, maybe the best division in all of baseball, because the Mets are right there. Syndergaard's not going to be back until later on in the season, but when you have a Jacob DeGrom, best pitcher in the National League, you throw him in there with Stroman. That's a solid 1-2 punch. And I said if Syndergaard can come back and give you some solid innings later on in the season, he's coming back from arm injury. That can be a team that's going to be right there, and they're one of my wild card teams. The Nationals, I know they won a World Series 2 years ago, but with Soto, maybe the best player in the National League. Well, Betts is right there, but he's another same as Lindor, top five guy. He's going to sign his big deal next probably. Well, if they don't sign by today, he's going to be in that same $300 million range as Lindor is. But you have Soto. Obviously, when you have Strasburg and uh, and Scherzer as your pitchers, that's a good start. So the Nationals, I don't think are going to go anywhere. Even the Marlins they made the playoffs last year. They're not championship contenders, but they're not awful like we've seen in the past with the Marlins. And then the Phillies, yeah, they've had fallen on some hard times, but when Bryce Harper's on your team, you can still be relatively competitive. But out of that entire that's a tough division top to bottom. But the Braves, I think, are still the best team, and I'll give the Mets a wild card spot. The NL Central, very tricky position. I'll take the Brewers. I think that when I think Yelich is still the best player in the division. Their pitching is not a lot of household names, but is solid enough to give you some good production. I know the Cardinals and I say the best player in the division, and Nolan Arenado is now a Cardinal. Remember, he got traded from the Rockies. That's a bold statement. And Goldschmidt's a solid player as well. And it's the Cardinals. Every time you say that they're not going to do anything, they find a way to win those 85 to 90 games and put themselves in playoff position. But I think Milwaukee is a slight edge over the Cardinals. Cubs are interesting too. Think about the Cubs though. I, Mid-season might be a fire sale for them. All their major players are free agents, from Bryant to Rizzo to a lot of others. If they get off to a bad start, remember David Ross, new manager there, coming over from the broadcast booth into the manager position. If they get off to a slow start, I think they're going to start trading those guys. And once that happens, they're going to take a dip. But if they keep those guys around and they can stay hovering, they could be a wild card team. And they can, and because what I'm trying to say about this division, Cincinnati is intriguing. Pittsburgh's bad. They're not going to be contending for much or in anything. This may be the 90 wins might win this division for you in the NL Central, because I think they may beat each other up in that regard. But Milwaukee's my team from there. And then the West, it's the Dodgers, defending champions, just a stacked, loaded team. Added Trevor Bauer in the offseason, maybe the best pitcher in all of baseball. And you add him to that rotation with Kershaw and Walker Bueller, another fellow Commodore, David Price. No, a lot of man will love in Major League Baseball. But obviously, Price opted out last season. He's back. He'll find his way into pitching. I don't know if it'll be the rotation or he'll pitch quite a bit. But that top three of Bueller, and you gotta say Bueller is the top guy now. Now Kershaw's a future Hall of Famer. We all know his accolades, but Bueller, Bauer, and Kershaw, that's the best top three in all of Major League Baseball. And Mookie Betts, who probably maybe the best overall player in the game, him and Trout have that conversation. You put that together, the Dodgers are going to be right there, winning the division and defending that championship. And the other wild card is the Padres. All their moves, from Darvish to Snell, obviously signing Tatis to a long-term deal. They already have Machado there. They're going to be a really, really good team. And the Dodgers and Padres, that's going to be a fun matchup in the Southern California region of our country. So I'm looking forward to that. But I think the Dodgers ultimately, slightly better pitching. That's why they'll find their way into that wild card spot. And then coming out of the NL, wow, I didn't. I put my predictions down. I didn't pick a team. Man, I think the Dodgers are still the top team in the National League. But I'm not going to be. I mean, we're based in Atlanta, Georgia. That's where we're located. And all my colleagues and people I cross paths with, they're all Braves fans. I'll show some love to Atlanta. I'll put them in the World Series, and they were right there last year. Remember, they were up 3-1 over the Dodgers in the NLCS. But I'll take Atlanta to make it to the World Series out of the National League, and that's not a homer pick. That's a legitimate pick. I think that, as I mentioned, all they talent wise are, I won't say right there with the Dodgers and the Padres, but they're very comparable. And I just think that that young pitching, is going to emerge even more this year, and they'll find a way to make their way to the World Series. The American League is another intriguing league for a lot of reasons. I think starting with the East, the Yankees win that division, and I was gonna say pretty handily. I know the Blue Jays have made some moves. Well, obviously bringing Sking Springer from the Astros, very solid move in that regard. They have all the young former MLB player, former the sons of former MLB legends. Obviously, you have Guerrero and Biggio and Bichette and all that stuff. Their their pitching is concerns me. Outside of Rue, as their starting pick, their pitching is, I don't know if it could hold up over a long season. We saw them do okay during the shortened season last year, but pitching tends to, if you don't have good pitching, it's going to show itself a lot more in this type of season, a traditional regular season. So I just don't like. I know Tampa, they always seem to find a way to get to their 80 to 90 wins, but they lost a good amount of talent this offseason. But the Yankees should roll. They're going to bludgeon teams offensively. Just start off with Judge and Stanton. Now, both those guys, they struggle to stay on the field consistently. I'll give you that. But those two guys, they can mash. Gregorius, I mean, they just have they're just the best hitting team in that division. And the pitching, I know they have Garrett Cole, and he's a solid player. The rest of their pitching staff, injury issues, they struggle to stay on the field, but they're just going to mash their way into that division. The pitching tends to rear its ugly head when it comes to the postseason, but as far as making the playoffs, the Yanks got that easily. The Central, you can make a case for Minnesota. You can make a case for the Chicago White Sox. Some people even think the Royals may be a lot better this year. I'm going to take Minnesota. I think the team that has been the most consistent team over the past few years, I'll take Minnesota. Now, Chicago is my wild card team, and Tony La Russa's the head man. Yeah, and that's not a misstatement. He is the manager of that team in his mid 70s. Respect to La Russa for being the manager. I don't know. That's going to be a lot for him to deal with. But I mean, La Russa's one of the best baseball minds ever. So he's still sharp in that regard. He will get that team contending and playing at a solid level. But I think that Chicago, the White Sox, will be one of my wild card teams, and the West, Houston's still the best team. I know they're dealing with some injuries as far as their pitching goes, but they still have a lot of talent there. They still have Altuve, they still have Correa, also have Bergman. They still have that talent that they're going to be a contender in the West and win that division. Oakland, we don't know who they are yet. You don't even know who the manager is, but you know that they're going to win between 85 to 90 games and be right there for the playoffs. That's what Oakland does at this stage. You, when you're the Angels and you have the best player in the game in Mike Trout, I can't ignore you. So I have to acknowledge you as being a playoff contender. And as I mentioned, Rendon is there for another year. The Otani deal, I don't know. I know this whole pitching and hitting experiment. Hitting wise, we've seen that he's a solid hitter, hit for average, does some good things, but he's coming off of the elbow injury to Tommy John. We just have not seen enough pitching for him, and they're relying on him to be an elite two-way talent for them. I just don't know if he's going to be able to keep that up for full time for them. Now, if he can, I can see them being a wild card team, but I just don't think that physically he is going to be able to give them really more the pitching than the hitting. Obviously, the hitting, he's a very good hitter, but they really need him to be that top line pitcher if they have postseason aspirations. And I cannot trust him to do that coming off of an elbow injury like that. So my wild card. So once again, a rundown. They have the Yankees, the Minnesota Twins, and the Houston Astros winning the divisions. My wild card teams, the White Sox. I really want to put Oakland in there, and that I think that I have Tampa listed as well. I'll put Tampa in there because, as I said, they just seem to find a way to be a wild card team. But Oakland is kind of my 2A or my 2B team for the wild card. As far as who gets out of the AL, it's got to be the Yankees at some point. If not now, when? I mean, I said, they have the best lineup. They have enough pitching to get by, and they just have to be that team to make it happen. And as far as the World Series goes, Yankees and Braves. Wow, that's a throwback to the '90s. I think the Yankees win. I think it's this year. And so I think Cole he's going to have a really good year. I think for New York. I think that Judge and Stanton find a way to play enough games to really finally be in the lineup together for at least 100 games this season. And I think if you have those two in there, they are going to just mash and put together some incredible numbers. But I'll take the Yankees over the Braves in my World Series. And don't hold me to it. Actually, hold me to it. I don't care. With these, I don't take predictions too seriously. Some they make a pick and they hold on to it with like their life on the line. It's sports. We try our best to give analysis and opinions, but if it things happen and if it doesn't work out for you, it just doesn't work out for you. So those that's my predictions as far as Major League Baseball goes. All right, let's wrap up the show to miscellaneous department. Just some quick hitters around the world of sports. Wow, Roy Williams just retired from North Carolina men's basketball. I'll throw that in there, man. Hall of Fame coach, multiple national championships, won three of them at North Carolina. One of the best college coaches in history. Wow, he's retiring. That's interesting, and we've seen him over the past few years been dealing with health things. He's passed out on the sideline. So I hope this isn't. Hope his health is right, just as a human being. So I hope that's not like the ultimate major issue. But I mean, obviously he's a senior citizen. He's been coaching for a very long time. But legendary guy, Dean Smith disciple, and I said won three national championships, produced numerous pros. If you did an all-time list of top 10 college coaches, he's got to be in that conversation to be right there. But that's a major news announcement that's come on during our show. But yeah, Roy Williams, the head coach of North Carolina men's basketball, is retiring after 30 plus years as a head coach. And probably 50 plus years if you consider his assistantship. Remember, he was an assistant at North Carolina for a very long time. And also, we had a very good run in Kansas, led them to multiple Final Four appearances. But yeah, the legendary career of Roy Williams looks like it has come to an end. I got that on my ticker as we're doing the show. That counts. That counts for miscellaneous department. Why not? We're throwing it all out there. Kevin Durant, stay off of social media. Why are you beefing with Michael Rappaport and having these conversations with? And look, I like Michael Rappaport. He's a good personality. He's got he does a lot of sports takes, which are interesting, and he's an entertainer. But man, if you gotta be careful with a guy like that if you're interacting with him because he will release these text messages, which should have been private, to the world. And if you're listening to the show, you know Kevin Durant, player for the Brooklyn Nets, NBA All Star, multiple time world champion, future Hall of Famer, all those accolades. He has been in I guess, texting war with Mike Rapport, actor, a social commentator. I don't know what you would call him. He's an actor. That's his main gig. But him and Durant have gone off and called each other names. Kevin Durant made some very homophobic and sexual statements against Rappaport. they're going back and forth. Rapport decided, and these were all their private text messages, or Rapport decided to post them on his social media platform for the public to see. So I'm kind of mixed on now. If it's private and it shouldn't be released like that, that's pretty bad. And Durant, if he really wanted to be raw with it, can legally go to some means as far as defamation of character and things along those lines. So we will see what happens along those lines. But it's a very good look for Durant. I mean, using that type of language is inappropriate, but it also was a conversation between two men that was soon to be private. So your criticism of that, you have to be very kind of careful of. But still, the point is, we've seen Durant in the past be very aggressive and with his social media and taunting people, making a lot of statements. And this one's with Rappaport, who's a nationally known actor. We've seen him go against trolls, him troll himself against non-major people as far as social media goes, or as far as life goes. So he just needs to stay off of the social media, stay off of these interactions with these people. And Rappaport, as I said, I like his content, but you have to also realize that he's a provocateur, that he is going to uh, be one of those guys that this is what he wants. He likes the attention. So you have to be very careful when interacting with those type of guys. But Durant's a grown man. He's in his 30s. He should be more focused on not just basketball and his, being his profession, but just in life. I'm sure he has a family, has friends, he has associates. There's a lot more energy that needs to go towards those type of things, towards the negativity of not only dealing with Rappaport, but just in general with social media. Social media is a good thing. It gives good interaction, provides information out there to people, but it's also a negative. It can be a very negative space if you allow it to be. And I think that Durant allows himself too often to delve into that world or that part of it. So he's got to be very careful with that. So I see that stuff, his little beef or interactions with Rappaport, and just he should be above that or bigger than that, honestly. But that's what he wants to do. He says he has the time to do it, but man, it's just a bad look. Enjoyed A Bad Trip on Netflix. That was a funny movie. It was a prank movie with Andre, who I know from the Eric Andre show, which I'm a big fan of, from Cartoon Network. So he did a full length movie. Him and Lil Rel, them going to traveling from Florida to New York, so that Eric Andre could meet the love of his life. Tiffany Haddish is the Lil Rel's brother or sister, and Rel is her little brother. She gets out of jail and causes a lot of stuff. But the point is, throughout the movie, the, pr- that's the plot. But all the interactions with other people are all pranks, and I don't want to give too much away, but there's a lot of stuff involving. It's a lot of gore, like stuff in the zoo, stuff in a lot of restaurants, things like that. It's a funny movie, and it's very rewatchable, and I enjoyed seeing it. As far as that Netflix movie goes. So I thought that was a good laugh. What else have I been watching? Just honestly, I've been watching a lot of sports, a lot of basketball, and that's been taking up a lot of the time over the past few days. So I've really not been able to get into my Netflix movies like I normally do. But I thought Bad Trip was a really fun one to watch. So I highly recommend that you check it out. So that concludes today's show. Thanks for listening. As always, you can head to the mothership to sportsinquirer.net and go to our social media platforms on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And then finally, you can also go to our platforms on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and iTunes, and subscribe to us. And that'll be a great way to get all of our content as we update it daily. Until next time, good fight, good night, be safe.